morning, brothers and sisters in Christ. My name is Dr. Phillip Akisoto. This is Medical Moments coming to you from Restoration Church, Madison, Alabama. This is the last installment of my talk as it pertains to COVID 2019 disease. Before I proceed, I'd like to say we should keep our fellow brothers and sisters and other, I mean nationally, that I'm speaking, everybody in this country and worldwide who are going through this horrible crisis for a medical, social, and also importantly, an economic standpoint. So that's what I would like all of us to at least spare thought for these people and pray for them. One thing I would like to state is that the first casualty in any crisis, I've said it before, is the truth. We're only getting snippets of the truth. And that we won't know the whole picture probably till a year from now when all the data comes in and everything has been revised. So again, I want to stress that don't get caught up in the media hype and everything because you're not really actually getting the whole picture. I always like to review what I've discussed earlier. So the first part of my talk was essentially about the virus, how it infects us and goes about causing disease, risk groups that are affected by it, testing. The second part of my talk was about the symptoms and measures we could use to handle or contain this disease process. And since my last talk, a few things have popped up. I just want to update you. There's been talk that Abbott Labs will probably be coming online with a new test. It's supposed to be 5 to 10 minutes. And the goal is to get this in doctors' offices, urgent care. So it'll just be the equivalent of like the flu test. When you go anywhere, they can quickly run it. That will be useful from the standpoint that we'll have an accurate picture of who and who doesn't have the disease and the true lethality of this disease. So I'm cautiously optimistic. Sometimes when they roll out something, there's always hiccups. So we just pray that it's hitch-free. The other thing that's happened is that we've noticed that a few younger people have been affected, but I always like to put things in context. Last year I did a talk on diabetes, obesity, and one thing we have to realize is that a 30 or 40-year-old in 2020 is not the same 30 and 40-year-old of the 1970s in the same USA. For instance, the sickest state in the South is healthier than the healthiest state, which people say is either Colorado or Washington, Washington D.C. Those people in the 70s are much healthier than the healthiest state we have now. So a 30-year-old, 40-year-old is, maybe because of the kind of sugary diets we're eating, sets us up for the risk factors for hypertension, diabetes, all these other things that increase your risk of having a poorer outcome. So that's one thing. And secondly, something that's come online too is the findings in Italy. One of the people in their Ministry of Health has come out and said that most of those COVID-related deaths were not, only about 12% were directly related to COVID, which sort of changes our concept of this problem. There are people who are dying with COVID, but not from COVID. It's not as if they got COVID and they just got all the lung damage and died and became septic and died. There's some people who had heart attacks, had regular pneumonia, had other conditions. They got sick, ended up in the ICU, and for some reason, because of the climate we're in, they got tested for COVID. COVID just happened to be a passenger, but not the main cause. So they're going to revise their numbers. Hopefully that might tamp down the hysteria. Secondly, the update on masks. CDC has changed their recommendations. Initially, it was if you had the disease, wear the mask. It's sort of been altered a bit. Because they're now discovering, because they're testing more people, they find that a lot of people who don't have little or no symptoms have the virus. So they're saying that even if you don't have any symptoms, that it doesn't hurt to wear the mask because a lot of people are asymptomatic. So that would decrease less transmission of the disease. And some new treatments have come online. They're not officially tested, but they're really clever treatments from my standpoint. My initial talk, the first talk, I talked about how the virus needs live tissue to thrive. It goes to your throat and works its way down to your windpipe and then your lungs. Now, I don't want to bore you with other details about how it does what it does, but because of these treatments coming online, hopefully in months, I need to bring this up. What the virus does when it gets to, because particularly where it does its damage is The cells of the lung that are responsible for allowing oxygen to transfer from your air sac into the bloodstream. It goes for those ones. That's why it causes its damage. But before it can't have access to that cell without a key. I'm just trying to use this is oversimplification, please. A receptor. So what it does, it has that key, it locks in there and gains access to the cell and starts all its trouble, telling the cell to use all of its resources to make more copies of itself. Well, so what some scientists are now doing, they're making, decoy versions of that key, that receptor, so that when the patient gets the medication on board, the virus can't tell which is from the cell or which is floating out there. It now latches onto the, so I call it decoy key, and gets this key jammed in there, it can't release. So it decreases the number of viruses that can attack the cell. So those decoy locks, so to speak, not the key, locks, sort of bind to the virus. Another thing, but there are still going to be some viruses that are going to escape those decoy locks. And they're going to still go to the cell and unlock it and work their way in. Normally when viruses do that, they set off alarms. And now the problem with setting off these alarms, and that's one of the things that they found out, especially in older people, this is the reason why they say younger people have less severe disease compared to older people, is that once the virus breaks into the cell, it sets off this alarm. And I'm being oversimplifying things. And it releases proteins. I call them alarm, but a protein. And those proteins, when they get into the bloodstream, all the cavalry comes in to fight the virus. Unfortunately, these are rookies. The ones that come first, the first responders are rookies. It's like arming a bunch of high school kids that just got 1 day's training on, armed resistance to go and take care of a problem. They won't do a good job. They're going to go there with bazookas, tank, and just blow up, not just that cell, but blow up everything and destroy everything, both good cell, bad cell. They can't really distinguish. They're not precise. So that's what causes disease to even progress rapidly and destroy the entire lung. Now, what these people are now found out is that they're going to get, and some substances are released. So what they're going to do, they're going to try and get medication that will sort of lessen the sound of the alarm, so all those dumb rookies don't go there and cause damage. Instead, you send in the SWAT team, who are more precise, take out the virus without causing collateral damage. So these are things coming down the pipeline. And all these companies are working hard because I think it's affecting it's not a personal thing. It's no longer about profit and competition. So they know that they probably know family members or friends affected. So that's changed the landscape. I want to talk about worrying. I talked about worrying because I see people, I still get calls, people are family, friends, or people who are still hysterical. And I've tried to reassure them. And worrying is, for me, it's normal for human beings to worry. I worry, anxious in the past, but when it obtained, maybe because I have some of the facts and I see what's going on, so I don't really worry because I know, as far as I have the facts, I know God will see us through this. That's another thing. Maybe my views are I've become more of a half full kind of guy as I've gotten older. And it's the difference between worry and concern. You can be concerned because people who are concerned are people who are solution oriented when it comes to a problem or crisis. But people who worry are people who just transition from worry to fear and hysteria, and you're no longer sound of mind, and that's what I think 2 Timothy 1:7 talks about. And that's the gist of that. So it becomes counterproductive, and you end up missing the big picture. When God even puts a solution right in front of you, you will not even see it. So. And even Christ has talked about that in Matthew 6:27. So he said, you cannot add, I'm just paraphrasing, a single day, an hour to your life by worrying. So, because worrying I liken worry to a toxic virus. It's, and the Word of God I use that as an analogy, it's a vaccine and treatment. If you're in the Word of God, it serves as a vaccine. When you start, all this negative energy coming from people, media, online, the Word of God and His promises serve as a vaccine to tamp down all those effects. Every now and again, I liken our faith to our immunity. Every now and again, our immunity wanes after you get your vaccine. So that's why we need to be in the Word of the Lord God frequently to serve as a booster vaccine. I talked about herd immunity the last time in my talk, and that herd immunity is when there's a number of people who need to be immune, either by getting a vaccine or just naturally acquiring immunity to decrease the transmission or stop the transmission of a virus in a community. I liken people having Bible reading sessions. We can now, because we are we need to socially isolate ourselves. You can do it through technology. I liken herd immunity, the believers coming together to read the Word of God. I'm trying to use the analogy of virus and immunity and vaccines. So that's what I see. So our form of herd immunity is, having Bible studies together with fellow human beings, fellow brothers and sisters, because we all need encouragement in this time. So that's why I liken herd immunity. And Proverbs 12:25 and Proverbs 17:22 talk about anxiety and what it does to our bodies. And if you are going to ingest any media, I have a few recommendations. There was one today I listened to on Focus on the Family, and it was they interviewed the Surgeon General, Dr. Jerome Adams. If you can get on, by the way, today is 4/20/20. I forgot to tell you, so that's what today is. But it happened today, 4/20/20. If you can go and Focus on the Family website, the interview was very, very enlightening. And he broke it down in very simple terms to give us up-to-the-date information of what may happen, without, being hysterical. So I liked it. And if you are still hysterical, and I hope you're not, after hearing that, you can also go to Focus on the Family website. They had a podcast on March 26th and 27th, and the title is Trusting in God in Worrisome Times. And it was done by Lee Strobel. He used to be the legal correspondent for Chicago Tribune. He used to be an avowed atheist, and his goal was to prove that Christ never existed. But the more he tried to dig about Christ, the more he became convinced that Christ did exist. So his perspective is very interesting. And for those of you who are a little geeky and still want more information, and the only reason why I'm bringing this up is so you can look at things in context, perspective, and say, well, I know things are bad, but my great-great-grandparents or great-grandparents had it much worse. You can also look, if you go on YouTube, you go to the Great Courses Plus, their channel, and look at the 1918 Spanish flu, parts 1 to 3. It will give you a very clear insight to say, yes, we're having a bad time, but we're talking about 50 million people dying in less than a month. That means 50 million people dying, not having the disease, dying, and total world population at the time was just 1.8 billion. That is staggering. I mean, we make a lot of noise. I'm not trying to belittle people's plight, but when you look at that, you now say, thank God I'm living in this age. So that's why I'm bringing that up. So this is the gist of my talk. Reasons to be cautiously optimistic, but not complacent. I'm not saying we should go wild, disregard all the advice we've been given from the health authorities. Please do that. But I always try to look at the silver lining in every dark cloud. And there's some reasons to be cautiously optimistic about this whole crisis. That it will come to it. This too shall pass. Well, number one, for a change, this is one national problem that everybody can do something about. If we just play our role, which is not do the things we're not supposed to do, social distancing, self-isolation if you have symptoms, certain hygiene actions which you engage in. I think I'm pretty confident, I said it a lot of times, this thing would dissipate. And we've seen this, and then number two, this is another reason why I'm saying number two reason is because with all countries, Korea, South Korea, Singapore, even China, though people quibble about their honesty, have seen precipitous drops, and even Japan, in their new cases and their deaths. So if we just follow the same playbook, we will come through this, no problem. So that's number two. Number three, this virus is not resilient. It's not like a norovirus or some virus that you have to you have to use certain kind of cleansing agents to kill. No, it isn't. You can use pretty much almost household cleaners to wipe this guy, alcohol. It's not that resilient. So this is a virus that can't survive. It's reported it can't survive very well in temperatures above 80 degrees. Number four, this measles is thankfully not a truly airborne virus. The prototypical airborne virus would be something like measles. That's why measles is nasty. If someone coughs with measles, it can travel and hang in the air for hours. I mean, lots of hours. It travels yards. I'm talking about feet here, but I'm talking about yards. 6 feet rule here will not even apply. Forget it. And it's very infectious. So this is a droplet infection. You cough, it's encased in water, slime, and it drops, especially if it's very humid, it will drop to the ground quicker. I mean, the surfaces, you still have to worry about that, but it drops to the ground and it's not floating in the air and causing so much infection. It's also very sensitive to ultraviolet rays too. Number 4, it's number 4, number 5, I can't remember, but I'll say number 4. The controversial is, some of you may have heard about the case fatality rate, or in layman's term, death rate, mortality rate. When this disease first struck in Wuhan, China, it was estimated the mortality rate was 20%. And to calculate this thing is it's very easy. You can do it yourself. As long as you have the two numbers, the number of deaths, and you have the number of cases. So for instance, if 10 people died and the total number of people that had the disease were 100, you just put 10 as the numerator divided by 100 as the denominator times 100 to give it percent. And you have that, that would be 10% case fatality rate, or if you want to say death rate. I'm trying to make it simple. But what's happened is that the more they tested people, what they found out is that the more they started testing a lot of people, and most people are asymptomatic. Most people who were diagnosed with the disease were asymptomatic, had very mild symptoms. The denominator number started getting bigger, while the numerator, that's the deaths, were very small. So what ended up happening was that instead of having a mortality rate of 20%, it dropped to less than 1%. People say 0.7%. For comparison, the flu has a case fatality rate of 0.1%. But remember, the flu, you can get it anywhere. You can check it in your, go to Walgreens, you can go to urgent care. So it's being widely tested. And I believe this is going to even drop even further the more the tests become available. For another comparison, Ebola has 50 to 80% mortality rate. So you know what kind of creature we're dealing with. That's comparison. Number 5, 80 to 85% of people that have the virus usually have mild, or maybe they're asymptomatic. And this is the reason why the CDC had to revise their instructions regarding use of face masks, because a lot of people, unless when they test, some of us are living with the disease and no problem, but they probably become immune to this thing unknowingly. So that's why they say if you have to wear the mask, you won't hurt anybody, and you probably might be helping if you're asymptomatic. Number 6, simple measures such as mass quarantining the population have been shown to be effective. They've caused 50 to 6% drop in transmission of infection. That's another good reason to watch the documentary, if you can. Great Causes Plus talks about the 1918 Spanish flu. That's where the idea really took off. And you look at the comparison, what happened in Philadelphia, what happened in St. Louis, or even San Francisco. You see the tale of two cities. One city did one thing and they paid the ultimate price for it, and another city didn't do it. Did what we're doing now. You can see the South Asian countries adopted that thing based on that, and you can see that they're coming down. They've peaked and now they're coming down, the number of cases. Number 8, the scientific community is, for the first time, being more collaborative as opposed to being competitive. I guess because this has come very close to the doorstep of all the scientists. So it's a personal thing. It's no longer a money thing. Number 9, this illness is not pervasive in all age groups. Yes, you have few kids may get it, few teens may get it. And the reason I gave is because my earlier part of this talk was that people speculate that children, in addition to them swapping viruses amongst each other, coronaviruses, the other coronaviruses, and may have acquired some herd immunity. People are saying that whenever the virus attacks their lungs and gets into their cells, they don't call the first responders, they call in the SWAT team. So they kill the virus without extensive collateral damage. So they don't have little or no symptoms. So children have a much finer tuned immune system than younger people, than older, much elderly people. Contrast that with the flu. The flu is no respecter of age. It will affect little ones, babies, all the way to the elderly people with the same viciousness. Number 10, things could be worse. I mean, there are other things that are much worse than the coronavirus. A very ferocious tornado, earthquake, tsunami, those things they're really frightening. There's nothing you can do about it. You're just at the mercy of God and of the event itself. And what I find because we're familiar with the flu, we're familiar with tornadoes, so psychologically we don't have this kind of level of hysteria because it's SARS-CoV-2 or coronavirus lay terms, is something new, and people that's what gets people worked up. They haven't been there before. And number 11, the promise of new therapies, as I mentioned earlier, will be coming down the pipeline. At least there's 73 different companies that are trying to come up with different therapies, 43 with different vaccines. So there's a race. This is an arms race. Another thing is that number 12, this disease is not uniform. Fortunately, there's some parts of this country that have, especially rural areas, little or no cases. These people have been social distancing themselves for centuries. I mean, one house, one a mile apart, half a mile, a quarter mile. So they have less of this disease. It would have been tragic if it was uniform. Everywhere you go, there was no, in quote, safe space, so to speak. So these people will definitely, some smaller towns will definitely recover quicker and will resume life much earlier than densely populated areas. So it's not a uniform disease where the whole country is going to shut down and not ever open up again for a while. I believe, being a half full kind of person now, I believe God always shows us a silver lining, and I still try and still look for these things, and that's maybe because I'm not as worried, or I'm concerned but I'm not worried. And that's one thing worry does. It doesn't let you see God's hand in things. You clutch onto your own puny human intellect and strength, and you only make things worse for yourself. And there's just a few silver linings, in spite of the inconvenience we've had to go through. The government has made us go through. Number one, people hopefully going forward after this pandemic will seek to, hopefully seek preventive measures regarding their health, because now people are aware that certain risk groups are high risk for coronavirus. Maybe they'll say, well, you know what? I need to check myself, what I eat, what I do. People will hopefully take it more seriously. But I know human memory tends to be very short-lived. Number two, this may also shape our hygiene practices. I mean, hopefully when people go to the bathroom, they wash their hands. In my last talk, I gave some numbers about doctors and how sloppy they were. Forget about the general public. And with that in place, maybe other diseases, less transmission of other diseases. People are more aware of, wiping down certain things and cleaning their hands. Not OCD, but just, with reason. Number three, the current quarantine and isolation, social distancing things inadvertently may have brought some couples, some families together. I, for one, my wife and I, we played this game just last week with our kids. It asked personal questions of us and of the kids, and I was shocked to find out how little I knew of my kids and how they viewed me. And that's all. I mean, normally I've been tired of work, they'll go to school, but now it's given an opportunity to really know my kids much better, and that's a big plus. Number four, with people embarking on all these higher level of hygiene and everything, we've seen less in the hospital. At least I can think of two hospitals I work in and one I visited locally. The ERs are relatively quiet. They're not like this. I'm surprised. They're relatively quiet. It's normally busy, extremely busy. That's because everybody forgets it's not only coronaviruses that can be checked with all these measures. I mean, flu can be checked, rhinovirus, all these other viruses. And people adopt the same measures, hand cleaning and doing all these things. It will also cause a precipitous drop in other viruses. People with asthma, people with lung problems, we don't see them, they're not coming to the hospital as often. So that's a plus. Number five, and most importantly, this time will probably give, hopefully all of us, but at least some of us, the opportunity to reflect on our lives and how we're living our lives, that is, in relation to God's will. And also our mortality. When people hear death, people start, at least older people, they start talking about, they become very vulnerable and say, well, I know I can go, things like that. So you reflect on your mortality, but most importantly, hopefully, I would hope, the afterlife. Yeah, that's inevitable, everybody's gonna pass, but do we know where we're going? And what has God promised us? Not only during this crisis, but afterwards. So this might give people an opportunity to meditate and think on these things. Number six, I mean, this may also force the government to retool itself and monitor changes the policies, healthcare policy. I mean, nobody could have predicted this, and maybe this might also be for the good of the country as far as healthcare deployment for the citizens. Also, in number 7, people will be more aware of healthcare policy, at least, and there will be, and any changes, people will be more attuned. No longer will we just sit back there and say, well, let them do whatever they want to do. But at least people will be more aware because of this close call that we've just had. Number 9, yes. Air, as a consequence of people not driving around and moving around less often, air quality reportedly has improved. In Venice, dolphins, I've never seen dolphins in decades, and now the canals where they used to have the gondoliers, the dolphins are now swimming there. So I'm not saying that we should do this and people should, because I know people's lives, their economic lives are tied into going to work. I'm not saying that, but at least it shows us that we can make some modification how we live our life. And the last one is, this is an opportunity for some of us to do our honey-do lists, engage in new hobbies, read that book we've always wanted to read. People should remember that some of the greatest ideas that mankind has put forward have come in moments of solitude and deep contemplation. I can assure you that Isaac Newton, if he existed in these days, he would have not discovered gravity, because he would have had his head buried in his iPhone, and the apples could have even dropped on his head. He wouldn't even think and say, what could have caused that? Even Einstein too, the same thing. So, one last thing I was going to say before I go is, social distancing is not social disengagement. Please check on friends, family members, co-workers. You'd be surprised, a lot of people who are lonely, you might not know that. I mean, a word of encouragement will go miles to bring these people out of this dark cloud. If you have elderly neighbors, at a distance, just check on them. Don't have to open the door. Check on the elderly, because they're very vulnerable, they're very, very vulnerable, not only medically, but socially. For some people who are relatively active and everything and can't keep still, one thing you can do, you can sort of try and keep the same routine you've had. Maybe wake up at the same time Monday to Friday, like you've always done, so that you don't get into this routine of boredom and tedium. Wake up at the same time, try and give yourself some realistic targets. Even if you're a student, have a desk, a study space. I'm not saying you should read all your books or anything, but at least have something to look forward to. That's one thing. If you wake up with no purpose, your mind can wander into places you don't want it to go to. So I'm going to end it with just Philippians 4:7. Then, because you belong to Christ Jesus, God will bless you with peace that no one can completely understand, especially in these times. And this peace will control the way you think, extremely important, and the way you feel.